production at a Rochdale plant is a new material likely to play a useful part in fighting fire. It's an aluminized asbestos cloth, withstanding very high temperatures, yet thin enough not to impede the fireman or to prevent its being sewn. In fact, just what fire brigades have been looking for. In the safely open spaces of Oulton Park, the county firemen got themselves up like invaders from another planet. Let demonstration commence. A car whose working life was over was to meet an end fiery enough for a Far Eastern hero. 2 gallons of petrol were sacrificed in the good cause, and the stage was set for the drama, Man versus Fire. Inside the car was a dummy. Could they get him out? It wasn't an easy fire to put out, but there was no doubt that the new heat-resisting suits proved 100% successful.
For some, it can apparently prove difficult to maintain believing in what they know to be a truth, when millions of dollars are at stake. During the last 100 years, asbestos fibers have been used in thousands of different products in the construction industry, in shipyards and in households. It was seen as a magic mineral, and the use of millions of tons of asbestos created a successful and very profitable industry, even though that selfsame industry was well aware that asbestos was extremely dangerous. But despite this awareness, the use of asbestos was allowed to develop into one of the biggest occupational health problems of the century, leading to thousands of deaths, and not only for those involved in its manufacture, but for all who came in contact with it.
Rochdale factory, the biggest asbestos textile plant in Europe, was the heart of this huge empire. It was here that Samuel Turner began using asbestos 103 years ago. Turner's prides itself on its pioneering work in health and safety, and its keen interest in the welfare of its workers. In 1920 they said, "The workshop shall be as a sanctuary, to which men shall enter with joy in their hearts and laughter in their eyes." So we began by asking the workers how much they knew about asbestos disease. Turners are clear. All workers are fully informed about the hazards of asbestos. Are you worried at all about working in an asbestos factory?
No, I don't. It doesn't affect me.
Do you know what diseases you can get from asbestos?
I don't know, to be honest with you.
Do you know what diseases you can get from
asbestos?
asbestos?
I do, yes.
Well, can you tell me what they are?
Asbestosis, for one.
Have you ever heard of mesothelioma?
I've heard of it, yes.
Do you know what it is?
A very chronic chest complaint.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
It's cancer. Do you know?
Well.
Did you know that? Can you tell me what diseases you get from asbestos?
Oh, asbestosis.
Yes. Do you know what diseases you can get from asbestos?
No.
No. Have you ever heard of mesothelioma?
No, no.
Do you know what diseases you can get from
We
asbestos?
do know, but we are looked after very well by the health there and everything.
Yes.
You know,
Can you tell me what diseases you can get?
What diseases can you get from this? Like,
I thought you said you
I do.
knew. Unable to reach agreement to film in the factory, after more than a year's discussions, we turned to the company magazine. On the front cover of issue 3, Bill Jagger, the very first Firefly personality of the month. He also made issue 4, in the obituaries, dead from lung cancer and asbestosis. More recently, Eva Howard was another loyal employee.
It was at the time when the asbestos industry was under attack from all sides, and she wrote to the local paper and said, "I've worked in the industry for 30-odd years, and it's done, you know, it's done me proud, and there's nothing wrong with me." And a couple of years later, she died of mesothelioma. So just how safe is it?
For 50 years, Turner's has been Britain's showpiece asbestos factory. Since the 1920s, every investigation into asbestos disease has depended upon the evidence from here. The latest report, the government's asbestos inquiry, began in 1977. Once again, evidence from Turner's model factory was central. Turner's are proud of the cleanliness and good housekeeping in this factory. As this film taken a few years ago shows, thousands of pounds have been spent on dust extraction equipment to keep dust levels below the legal limit. The monitoring of the asbestos dust and the regular medical checkups seem impressive. In 1978, Turners were very confident of conditions inside the factory. It is extremely unlikely, they said, that anyone commencing work at TBA will have his health affected at all. However, scientists from Oxford University predict that after a lifetime's work here, the number of these workers who will die of mesothelioma, lung cancer or chest disease may be as high as 1 out of every 10. At Rochdale in 1978, Turners also said deaths from lung cancer do not differ significantly from the national average. That was untrue. The lung cancer rate at the time was almost twice that national average and rising. And if Turners breached the current legal limits, deaths could be even higher. This confidential document is Turners' 1976 written evidence to the asbestos inquiry. At the last minute, they removed these 4 pages, in which they admitted they'd breached the law many times by having dust levels as high as 26 fibres. That's 13 times the legal limit. This is Vortex, a safe wet process that Turners say is remarkably dust-free. But in 1982, the dust levels in Turners' Vortex department have breached the legal limit significantly. Even worse, experiments at Edinburgh University injecting Vortex dust into rats has shown that this supposedly safe process can give cancer. A Turners' internal minute reports that in the rats, Vortex dust gave a high rate of mesotheliomas. So even in modern conditions, working at Turners could be dangerous. Donald Robinson has worked in several departments, but mainly in Vortex. He thought that in modern times, working at Turners was quite safe. Last year, Donald, who is married with 4 children, was told he had the asbestos cancer mesothelioma. Donald Robinson is age 39. Turners also told the asbestos inquiry that in the weaving shed, the factory showpiece, which for 30 years has kept to below the legal limits for asbestos dust, they had no disease whatsoever, that not one single weaver has contracted asbestos-related disease. But what about this man who worked in the weaving shed? Records show he had suspected asbestosis. That was in January 1968, fully 8.5 years before Turners stated they had no disease whatever amongst weavers. He wasn't the only one, as these records from that same year, 1977, show. The number of weavers with suspected asbestosis, not nil, but 13. Among them, Joe Testaferrata Donato. The medical records show he had asbestosis. That was in 1977. But Turners let him continue work with asbestos and didn't move him out of the danger area.
We've got a document which shows that that Mr. Donato had was a definite case of asbestosis. Did you ever know anything about that?
No, it wasn't. He was never told that.
Well, I mean, this document here says, you know, it's in the doctor's...
Look, just a minute. I knew Joe Donato. There's no way that Joe knew anything about this at all. This is disgraceful.
Was he ever moved?
No, certainly not. He worked with me for the last 10 years. We worked back-to-back partners. There's no way that Joe knew that he'd got asbestosis.
A few months after that last checkup, and nearly 6 years after the company doctor first diagnosed lung damage, Joe Donato died of lung cancer. He was 54. Turners also stated to the asbestos inquiry that they had 48 cases of mesothelioma, but that none of these could be described as cases of slight exposure to asbestos. But Margaret Crimes worked here as Turners' telephonist. Emma Marshall was Turners' office cleaner, but they both died of the asbestos cancer mesothelioma. This is Turners' own list of mesotheliomas. Among the exposure times, 16 months, 1 year, 7 months, 5 months, 3 years, and the last one, a woman exposed for just 10 days. In this 1980 questionnaire, Turners told one of the unions that the number of mesotheliomas in the previous 4 years was just 3. In the same period, we found 6. Turners also told the unions, in 1980, the level of asbestosis between 1950 and 1979 was just 20. We found 81. Even 2 years before that questionnaire, Turners knew of at least 31, as their own list, complete with dates certified by the government panel, shows. We found 50 more cases on death certificates. The total, not 20 cases, but 81. The real figure must be higher, because death certificates often fail to record industrial disease. Margaret Priestley, for example, was a jolly 17-stone woman. Before she died, she shrank to an unrecognisable 8 stone. Officially, she was 70% disabled with asbestosis, but there was no mention of asbestos on the death certificate. Yet this government panel report reveals her death was due to asbestosis. Edward Wellings died in 1981. He had asbestosis for 16 years before he died, yet his death certificate stated he died from heart trouble. The Rochdale coroner even refused to hold an inquest. But this pathologist's report shows that Edward Wellings in fact had asbestos in his lungs. Even worse, he had cancer of the lung. But neither cancer nor asbestos was on the death certificate. As a result, his widow never got the special pension which Turners normally give to asbestos widows.
I don't see why I should suffer for 16 years and then say I ain't got it. And I think, well, I just think Turners are getting away with murder.
Turners told the Asbestos Inquiry in 1977 that the prevalence of asbestos disease in their British factories was no more than 1 in 300. Yet Dr. Geoffrey Morris, then Turner's chief medical officer and a former university lecturer, was within months concluding that the definite or strongly suspected cases of asbestosis at Turner's Rochdale was not 1 in 300, but more than 1 in 4, after just 10 years at work. Soon after, Turners and Dr. Morris parted company. The main asbestos inquiry authors never received Dr. Morris's vital 1 in 4 findings from Turners, and they were never published.
I think that no scientific fact which is properly conducted should be hidden under the pillow. It should be allowed the light of day and given the chance of the eminent scientists in this country and others to criticise.
And is that what happened in this case? It was hidden under the pillow?
It was never asked for.
The British Occupational Hygiene Society checked Morris's X-ray readings. At Rochdale, they found well over half the workers, 58%, had the first signs of lung damage. That study has never been published either. A wealthy suburb of St. Louis, Missouri. Dana Bond has been widowed because of asbestos. Her case made American legal history. Her husband Richard had worked for just a few months with asbestos, using a process invented by Turner and Newell and exported to America. Then this healthy, fit man developed asbestos cancer. His lawyers recorded this tape.
You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, self you got it?
Yeah.
Will you state your name, sir?
It's Wayne Bond.
Where do you live, sir?
I live in Fountain, Illinois.
How old a man are you?
32.
Are you married or single?
Married.
What is your wife's name?
Dana Bond.
Do you have any children?
3.
Sir, prior to your health problem, what had been your business or occupation?
I was a teacher. I coached varsity basketball, coached football.
Are you suffering a particular illness at this time, sir?
Yeah.
What is, do you understand what it is or what they call it?
Pleural mesothelioma, asbestosis.
Asbestosis and mesothelioma?
3 days after this testimony was taken, Richard Bond died, aged 32. Turners and their American agents paid his widow $1,400,000 compensation, That's nearly £750,000. Compare then the fortunes of Dana Bond, with £750,000 from Turner's to ease her financial worries, to those of Ada Brown of Rochdale. Like Dana Bond, she's a Turner's asbestos widow. Like Dana Bond, her husband died of the asbestos cancer, mesothelioma. Soon after he died, a man from Turner's visited her.
He sat down, had a chat with me and that, you know, and he said, well, Turner's has decided to give me this gift of £200. And at the time I was very upset because I thought it was awful. I'm not that I come home no more. Just talking about it.
When you say it was awful, the £200, what do you mean? What do you mean?
For a man's life. And there's others like him in there.
Now Ada Brown gets an additional £7 a week, but it's a grace and favour payment. Turner's can cut it off at any time. Ada says she was never told of her basic legal rights. She could have sued Turner's, yet Turner's say, we accept our obligation to treat with consideration and generosity any of our people whose health has been impaired. Steve Hines' wife worked for Turner's for 21 years. She too died from the asbestos cancer, mesothelioma. How much compensation did he receive?
Not one penny. He said, no, he said that there won't be anything. He said, because he said, when people go work at Turner's, he said, they know the risk what they're taking on.
Were Turner's sort of helpful and considerate in other ways when she died?
Only way they was considerate was I wrote them a letter about the pension scheme, and they said they was going into it. And a week or two after, I received another letter to say I would be getting just over £100, which bought a headstone. But otherwise, the only other thing I got was a wreath for her grave.
Now, Sir Cyril Smith, the former MP for Rochdale, has rejected claims that he helped a local firm cover up the dangers of asbestos. In 1981, Sir Cyril told Parliament asbestos posed no danger to the general public.
But we now know that weeks earlier he asked the world's biggest asbestos manufacturer to let him have the speech they'd like to make. Today, Sir Cyril, who's now 80 years old, came out fighting, claiming he was defending jobs in his constituency. Stuart Flinders reports from Rochdale.
This is Rochdale's Spodden Valley, once home to the firm of Turner & Newell, the world's largest asbestos factory. In the 1980s, the local MP faced a dilemma. More than 2,000 people were employed here, and yet there was growing evidence of a link between asbestos and fatal illnesses. So should the MP be more concerned about jobs or health? In 1981, weeks before the House of Commons debated banning the sale of asbestos, the then MP Cyril Smith wrote to Turner & Newell.
Could you please let me have the speech you would like to make, were you able to, in that debate? In particular, points of disagreement with EEC documentation, points to urge, etc.
After the debate in Parliament, the Rochdale Observer reported,
a Labour move to have the sale of asbestos products banned throughout the common market was defeated in the House of Commons on Thursday after a warning by Mr Cyril Smith MP that it could cost hundreds of jobs in Rochdale and thousands throughout the country. He said, there is no danger to the public at large from asbestos.
Derek Phillips used to live near the factory. He suffers from mesothelioma, a mostly asbestos-related cancer.
I always used to rate Cyril Smith. He called a spade a spade. But he should have been coming out on the side of the people that were poorly, not jobs. They could have shut the factory and built something else there.
Cyril Smith's letter and speech were uncovered by Jeff Tweedale at the Manchester Metropolitan University.
It's full of highly questionable assertions, even in 1981, such as the fact that there's no risk to the public, that the working conditions in the Rochdale factory were safe, and so on. Those statements were untrue even in 1981, which makes it particularly disappointing that Cyril Smith apparently seems to have accepted them at face value.
Sir Cyril rejects the idea he only consulted the firm. He knew and spoke to many asbestos workers, he says. Now 80 years old, he stands by his actions.
If they
are saying that I should have gone for closing the company. They're saying that I should have gone for 2,500 people to put on the door.
No, I don't think anyone's suggesting you could close a factory, but I think there's a suggestion that maybe you could have asked some different questions. I mean, you said in the House of Commons there is no danger to the public at large from asbestos.
Well, there isn't, and there never was, and there isn't now, and there never was.
Really?
Well, of course. There's no danger to the public at large. You were never in danger of it. I was never in danger.
But near that factory who believed they were in danger of it.
Well, I'm not sure you're correct, actually. I think you're overstating that case. There were people that worked there that knew they were in danger of it, but nobody made them work there. They could have left.
Now, it has taken 6 years, but tonight, people power has won the day in Rochdale. Campaigners have stopped controversial plans to build houses on the site which once housed the world's largest asbestos factory.
Local people had feared that building work could release harmful fibres into the air, so they took on the £100 million planning application and won. Our environment correspondent, Colin Sykes, is at the site now. Colin.
Well, Ranveer, when we know just now how dangerous asbestos is, but in 1870, when the Turner brothers opened this factory, they had no such qualms. Asbestos was seen as a magic mineral. It had extraordinary properties, and we can show you some pictures of the factory in its heyday. It employed thousands of people, and it became a world headquarters for the asbestos textile industry. It was only later that the full dangers of asbestos became known. When the factory eventually closed, a company, MMC Estates, applied for planning permission to build about 600 homes on this site. But local people had serious misgivings about that, and tonight that planning application has been turned down. One of the campaigners is Jason Addy, who is with me now. Jason, just why did you feel so strongly about this?
As a youngster, I watched my grandfather wither away with the asbestos cancer mesothelioma. I'm nobody special. Many people have lost loved ones and friends in the area to this very cruel asbestos disease.
And of course the site is huge, but a lot of the asbestos waste was dumped on the site.
Well, the 6.5 years of the campaign has confirmed that thousands of tonnes of asbestos waste is dumped on the site. This is a very dusty factory that produced asbestos for over 130 years.
And this campaign has gone on for a long time. Why has it taken so long?
Good question. But it's been the persistence and the team effort of so many people, not only in Rochdale, but throughout Britain and the world, that finally some common sense has prevailed.
OK, this isn't the end of the story, because another application could be put in. So what do you want to see happen to this site?
There must be a community plan B, a safe green lung for the people of Rochdale. This is a site that's paid a very bitter price as a result of asbestos disease, and it deserves now to rest in peace, like far too many of its victims.
I'm Group Manager Holtz, and I'm officer in charge of this incident here tonight at Turner's Old Asbestos Works in Rochdale. Well, what's happened is there's a fire in the disused factory. It appears that the cause of the fire is as yet unknown, and the material that's burning is generally the structural part of the building, which is the timber. Well, we've had up to 4 sectors in operation. We've had a water tower from a hydraulic platform vehicle working in Sector 1, 2 jets in Sector 2 and ground monitors in Sector 3. All the water's been supplied from the local river, and we've been in touch with the Environment Agency, and at the moment we don't have any issues in relation to water runoff. Because it's an old asbestos works, we would advise local residents to keep the doors and windows shut. This is purely as a precaution. We will be doing some air sampling later in the day to clarify that there aren't any harmful particles within the smoke plume. It was quite a tough job in the first couple of hours, but things have settled down now and hopefully we'll have it well under control by the time it becomes daylight, after which we can make entry into the building and make sure that any last remnants of the fire are completely extinguished.